Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Capitola City Council meeting to order and welcome all of you here that are here tonight, and welcome all those who are at home watching, and welcome all those who will be watching the rebroadcast of the meetings. We appreciate your interest and welcome your telephone calls and emails and letters, and let us know what you think about what's going on in Capitola. It looks like we have a new art show in the chambers, so I invite all of you to enjoy the art tonight, and when we're open for meetings, for the Planning Commission meetings and others, and it looks like there's some beautiful things here tonight. May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Norton.
Here.
Councilmember Story.
Here.
Councilmember Bottorff.
Here.
Councilmember Termini.
Here.
Mayor Harlan.
Here. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item is a presentation, and there isn't anyone available to receive it tonight, but we will be sending it to them. A group asked us to have a city proclamation declaring October 20th through 26th Freedom from Workplace Bullies Week. Whereas the City of Capitola has an interest in promoting the social and economic well-being of its employees and citizens, whereas that well-being depends upon the existence of healthy and productive employees working in safe and abuse-free environments, whereas research has documented the stress-related health consequences for individuals caused by exposure to abusive work environments, whereas abusive work environments are costly to employers with consequences including reduced productivity, absenteeism, turnover, employee dissatisfaction, and injuries. And whereas protection from abusive work environments should apply to every worker and not limited to legally protected class status based only on race, color, gender, national origin, age, or disability. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Capitola recognizes October 20th through 26, 2013 as Freedom from Workplace Bullies Week, and encourage citizens to mark this week with special activities and programs to break through the shame and silence enshrouding adult bullying at work. And they gave us some buttons and also a copy of this book that's entitled The Bully-Free Workplace, Stop Jerks, Weasels, and Snakes from Killing Your Organizations by Gary Namey and Ruth Namey. And I did go to a couple of websites that they gave us, and they were very interesting, very, very interesting. You know, I know we don't encounter that here in Capitola, and thank goodness I don't encounter that at my work, and I don't think I ever have. But I've certainly heard cases where that has happened, and it's just awful. It's just awful if it's not stopped by the upper management. So I hope that if any of you know people that are experiencing that at their workplace, that they will speak up and try to get some changes going, because that's not a safe, healthy environment to work in. So that's our proclamation. And the next is a presentation by the Citizens Against Wireless Radiation. Good evening.
My name is Karen Nevis. I think I know everybody here, and you guys know me. You ended up with me tonight because we don't have a credentialed speaker for you, so I've been wanting to speak anyway, and I love all of you guys so much. You guys do such a good job, and I know that you have the concern of the citizens here in Capitola dear at heart. The issue that we're going to... Thank you, sorry. The issue that we want to talk about tonight is wireless, which includes Wi-Fi, which includes smart meters, which includes cell phone and cell tower exposure. Almost on a daily basis, I receive updates about what's happening in the world, not just here, and more credentialed speakers, which I mean by that, I mean scientists and doctors are publishing reports as fast as they can, because everything points to the damage from exposing the human body to wireless. Wireless is microwave radiation. Microwave radiation is what the military uses for weaponry, which means Wi-Fi routers, cell towers, all can be considered weapons that damage the human cells, the human body. And I am so sensitive, you know that. I've had to step down from the Art Commission because I can't sit in this environment. Just to be here tonight, I'm already like this. And I'm doing the best I can to heal and get stronger, and unfortunately I am one of those sensitive people. So I'm going to put this up. for the audience that's watching, because if that'll stay up, okay. So that they can see that where they can get some information. There's a couple of people, Dr. Barry Trower and Dr. Mog Bahavis, who have a lot of short and lengthy videos online with a lot of pertinent information for anyone who wants to understand more about this. So I want to go over for people watching some of the symptoms that come from exposure to wireless. And I have expressed my concerns here for you sitting in this room right now. There's 8 Wi-Fi signals right in here, plus you have antennas on the police station, and I know the police are heavily wired, plus they also have exposure to TETRA, which is a whole different thing that Dr. Barry Trower talks about. The fire department has an antenna on that. Now our library has a new antenna on it, and you have children and people that are in there. And I had a booth this summer at the bandstand, and there's an antenna on the bathrooms, and I got very sick. So there's a lot of public exposure, and I think one of the reasons I wanted to speak up is because a lot of people are not connecting the dots, and they're having symptoms. So I made a list of some symptoms I wanted to read off, so people that are watching who maybe don't realize that they could be experiencing these things. So, I mean, one of the first things for me is a headache. I already feel it coming in here. Nausea and vomiting, I have those, and nosebleeds, I have all that. Other people have a rushing sound in their head, exploding headaches, their legs get weak or they have a tight feeling in their legs, they lose their balance, heart arrhythmia. When you had a router right here, you used to have it right in front of the podium, my heart would go brrr, like it was, anyway, and we asked and you did move it, that it's still in the building. Chemical sensitivities, dizziness, panic mode, depression, and also exposure to wireless affects fertility for people who are working to have children. Because of it, a lot of people have to alter their lifestyles now, which means they retire early, they move away, they lose income, they get sick, a lot of cancers, a lot of tumors. I know so many people right now that are sick, and even friends I know, and you know, we're into this now for several years where it's intense and it's getting ramped up more and more and more every single day. And in addition, what's happening is, if you've looked at the power lines, I've started to study the power lines, because city after city they get these blanket things from the providers that say, we want to put in more coverage so people can watch movies on their iPhones at the beach. Well, what that means is those towers are getting really heavy. Those bottom lines now that are very heavy, that's your telephone for the new G4. Then above that is actually some PG&E stuff a lot of times. And then above that, what they're doing now is what's called DAS, which is distributed antenna systems. And this is a big heads up for the city, because we're dealing with it too with Board of Supervisors. The providers are coming in like Verizon, and they're saying, you know, here's a petition, let us put these in wherever we want. And the DAS antennas are actually cell towers that are being installed on telephone poles. And right now they're installing out in Aptos. We just did a map and mapped them all out, and it's happening. So you don't even know, and all of a sudden, right by your house is going to be one of these distributed antenna systems put on a telephone pole so that you have better coverage on your phone. If there wasn't such a price to pay, I'm all for the technology, and I think that there's new technology that will come in eventually, but right now, across the world, the symptoms are ramping up, the radiation is ramping up, and we're living in a sea of radiation that we cannot see or smell, unlike cigarette smoke, unlike asbestos when we were exposed to that, or DDT. We've had a lot of things through history. So now this is the newest thing, and it's one of the, I think, the biggest issues that's going to be happening this century as we have more and more exposure. And I'm concerned even with, you know, your employees here that work here. They have so much exposure up there, and they, you know, then they get sick, and then they, you know, there's medical bills, and it goes on and on and on. And I would like to see this city. I'm really proud of this council, because, you know, we came to you for a moratorium on smart meters, and it took a while, but we got it. Even though it wasn't enforceable, it was still a big step forward, and I think I'd like to see the city now take some steps as far as prevention. So as much as possible, you know, you're hardwired. You start eliminating some of the Wi-Fi and just do it the old-fashioned way, because it's much safer. I'd like to see the city purchase a meter or two, and maybe might, because you're in electricity, you might be able to suggest some models that maybe the city could have, the Public Works or somebody could have, and actually go around and test your offices and make some changes. So, and also to be aware when the providers come here and they want to put cell towers and these distributed antenna systems everywhere, what they're doing. And in hindsight, when I remember the night Dennis was the mayor and he didn't have the funds because of the flooding and everything to enforce that ordinance, and Mike Card was the police chief, and he didn't want to deal with it. And all of a sudden, when he threw up his hands the next day, they brought in a semi-load truck of smart meters. They brought in 32 installation trucks and providers, and they started installing 1,000 smart meters a day. And I want to read a letter that this is just, I don't know this woman, I just got this, and I just want to read this letter on the record. Dear Capitola City Council members, I will unfortunately be unable to attend the meeting on Thursday to address you in person. I want to share my concerns and personal experience with the dangerous smart meters. I reside at the Capitola Shores condominium complex on Diamond Street. After the banks of smart meters were installed in my building and surrounding buildings, I began to feel a strange burning sensation in my head and starting to hear a strange, loud-pitched staccato sound in my ears. I had never before had ringing in my ears. At first, the ringing would disappear when I left my home and then would reappear when I came home. The ringing gradually became worse until it was non-stop 24 hours a day, even when I was away from home. The disturbance was so bad in my bedroom I was unable to sleep, and I had to move out and sleep in another area of my home farther away from the meters. I would have been forced to move out had I not had my home professionally shielded against radiation, which was quite costly. And I did contact her about more information on this, just for myself. And it was very expensive. The shielding helped to reduce the volume of the ringing, but it did not stop it. I still have the ringing in my ears 24/7 and spent a lot of money trying to heal the condition holistically. It has been almost 2 years. There is no medical cure, and I face the prospect of living with this condition for the rest of my life. Recently, I was diagnosed with early-stage cancer and had 2 surgeries. I am now cancer-free and believe the sleeplessness, the stress, and the damage caused by the smart meter radiation compromised my immune system and contributed to the manifestation of this cancer. It worries me that I and everyone else in the community are being exposed to this dangerous radiation. And it goes on, but I just wanted to read that part of it because of the awareness that I have because of my own sensitivities. A lot of people call me and I see the stories and I hear the stories through the emails and all of how many people are having symptoms and getting sick. You know, so it's just time to take a step forward. It's a really serious matter. It's not nothing. So what I'd like to do is, we brought a 5-minute video. It's actually, this movie just came out. It is a documentary. It's under 2 hours long. Anyone can see it. I've got the website here online. I think it's $4.99 right now because it just was released. And it's kind of a good overview of this whole issue. And I learned an awful lot, even though I thought I knew quite a bit. So I really wanted to encourage even the City Council. I know, Stephanie, I got a copy over to you. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it.
Very interesting.
Yeah, okay, good. So this is just 5 little excerpts from it. Dr. Klinghart's going to be the first speaker, and he's very credentialed about the tests they're doing, about the blood being exposed to smart meter exposure, the degradation of the cells, and then talking about the Wi-Fi. The charts that will be shown are really shocking. And at the very end is a testimony of a woman who lost her son to cancer because he had a dorm room in San Diego right next to a cell tower. And she did research and found that everybody that had been in that dorm room almost had cancer and died. So if we could show that. Okay, thank you, Sue. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you.
Our experience as physicians that everybody is equally electrosensitive. You install this thing, measurably certain things in your health go down. You know, we're tracking now certain sensitive parameters of it. One is an inflammatory marker called TGF-beta1, goes way, way up as soon as the smart meter is installed. The MMP9, that's metalloproteinases, go way, way up. These are inflammatory markers. The copper level in the serum goes up as a sign of chronic inflammation driven by something that's suddenly there. The hormones go way off, the neurotransmitters go way off. So we have lab tests that we can show. Here's the patient, we monitor him for 10 years before, he was completely normal. The smart meter was installed 6 months later, the patient looks like a dying patient.
Meter. Before the exposure, we see the same thing as we saw in the first samples. Normal cell walls, fairly separated and looking healthy. So after 2 minutes of exposure in front of the smart meter at about 1 foot away, we see a totally different story. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up, which makes it very difficult for the blood to deliver oxygen to the tissues as they would be their normal function. Every single one of these is a degradation.
There is a worldwide paradigm shift steadily underway. 60,000 doctors in the American Academy of Pediatrics are paying attention. And teachers' unions, this one of 45,000, are beginning to speak out against Wi-Fi in the classroom. Some regions are taking steps to cut the power of cell phone masts by 90%. And in many areas, towers are starting to come down altogether. But governments such as the US want smart grids and high-powered Wi-Fi mesh networks to blanket everywhere and everything, as industry cleverly camouflages itself, concealing the harm it is doing. Also at 1.0, the science shows the following bodily effects can occur: headaches, dizziness, fatigue, insomnia, chest pain, difficulty breathing, and indigestion. 2.5 saw altered calcium metabolism in heart muscle cells. 4.0, changes in the hippocampus affecting brain memory and learning. And at 6.0, DNA damage in cells. So, where are smart meters on this list? Electrical Power Institute in December 2010 measured a single Itron smart meter with pulses up to 7.93 microwatts per centimeter. Even a conservative number in an apartment building tested at 19.8 microwatts per centimeter squared. This is hundreds of times higher than levels which clearly indicate harmful effects. So how can utilities and governments get away with forcing these devices on everyone? This is how. In Canada and the US and several other civilized countries, the safety limit is set at 600 to 1,000 microwatts per centimeter.
My son, Rich Farver, died October 11th of 2008, and he was in NASA Tier Hall, room 131. Professor Charles Cutter died June 19th, 2008, NASA Tier Hall, room 131. Lou Terrell, diagnosed with primary lymphoma brain cancer in 2008. He was in the room right next to room 131. Dwight Anderson died in 2008, NASA Tier Hall. Miss Laurel Amtower died August 29th of 2010. Richard Funston died, and he was also located in NASA Tier Hall, room 131. I just think that this wireless stuff, we just need to get a handle on it and warn the public.
Thank you. I'll just wrap up really quickly. Those are just quick excerpts that come from here. There's a lot more information in here, and it flows together much better because there's more information. Another woman, Eileen O'Connor from England, one thing she said was that she got breast cancer because she lived next to a cell tower. And she said that, and she's done a lot of work since then, but she said today that in England, 600 people a week above normal are dying from cancers. And in England, they actually started removing a lot of the towers. The people did. One day they took down 9 or 10 towers. And I think it was the Philippines, the people took down several, I don't know, a lot of towers, like 100 towers. I know Europe's moving their cell towers away from populated areas. They use fiber optic cable. They're not using so much wireless. They're so much more ahead of us in so many areas. So Marilyn just came and generously brought copies for each of you. So I'll bring these to you. Oh, thank you, Sue. You can do that. Thank you. And I'd like to encourage any of the public watching to go to takebackyourpower.net and watch this film. Watch it with your family. At least you have more information to make choices in your life. And I really thank you for this time you've given me on this very sensitive and not easy to talk about often issue that often puts a wedge in relationships and families. And we just need to go forward anyway, because it's a big enough issue that it's so important. And I know that with more knowledge, then we can start to make better choices. And the last thing I want to say is I heard that when the RTC got permission to take over the railroad tracks, that Verizon immediately put in a bid to put a cell tower on our train trestle. I'd like to see that not happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item is a report on closed session. On this issue? We're going to have oral communications. They want to speak on this issue? Okay, come up. Good evening.
Good evening. I want to thank Karen for this very much, and also for members of the public who want to see Take Back Your Power on a screen, a big screen. It is going to be shown on Wednesday, November 20th at the Santa Cruz Live Oak Grange. And it says, the subtitle is, "Our Corporations Paving a Perilous Path Directly into Our Homes." Filmmaker Joshua Del Sol, who's from Canada, will take us on a journey of revelation and discovery as we question the benefits and risks of smart, in quote, meters and wireless technology and corporate practices of tapping into private information and eroding our rights in the name of green. This powerful film exposes the latest science and data. What you discover will surprise you. You just got a sample of it. So that's Wednesday, November 20th at the Santa Cruz Live Oak Grange. And as this technology proliferates, there are these 4G cell towers for Verizon on utility poles. And I am very upset because there are 13 of these on the zoning administrator's agenda tomorrow that are on Freedom Boulevard, Day Valley, McDonald. So it's turning utility poles into radiation-emitting cell towers that are right next to people's homes. And I asked the planner, Frank Barron, in the county, I said, are there more of these that are coming to your desk? 35 more for the area. So this is like to make the whole world radiation hotspot with nowhere to escape. So that meeting, and I'll give you an announcement of this, is tomorrow. I'd like people from the public to come and object to this in the public right-of-way that is damaging our health and our rights to be safe in our person and property. 5th floor of the county government building, Ocean and Water, tomorrow, that's the 25th, at 9 a.m. And I want to say that in Sweden, there's an article here, The Draining Effect of Our High-Tech World. When they turned on, activated the 4G in Sweden, it says here, within minutes of activating the tower, people started reporting to the hospitals with dizziness, blurred vision, and nausea. Cases of heart arrhythmia. All symptoms disappeared within minutes of getting out of range of the frequencies. They shut down the tower in Sweden due to potential health problems. However, 2 years later, Here in the United States, they proceeded with a nationwide rollout, and that's what's coming right now. And this really needs to stop. I mean, for your children, your grandchildren, all the wildlife, life on the planet, we need to put a halt to this and not act like this isn't a major problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone else like to speak? Yes, please. Please come up. You can give us your name for the record or not, but if you want your
Yes.
name spelled correctly,
Can
you
you
can
hear me?
sign in also.
My name's Judy Moore, and I'm going to read a poem I wrote and was published in the Connection magazine on this very subject and back in 2011. So I'll just get right into it. How much time? 3? I better get going because I don't think I'll make it with just 3 minutes. Okay, it's called In a Rush to Advance. Risk takers, money makers with uncontrollable greed. This is a recipe for corporations to succeed. In a rush to advance, they have left our pristine world behind, those risk takers, those companies with a one-track mind. But our essential needs should never be left to chance. We must protect our food and air if we want to advance. Wireless high-tech affects the planet and our health, while unscrupulous corporations amass greater wealth. New wireless gadgets cast an alluring evil spell. How many more casualties will result? Only time will tell. Glioblastoma, brain tumors, leukemias, and much more, faced with this collateral damage from this new kind of war. The naive public might wait for unquestionable proof, while greedy corporations hope the world remains aloof. Our health and our ecology, we need to give more thought. Look at the human misery Fukushima has brought. Due to radiation leakage and human error, the Fukushima accident has caused worldwide terror. Yet corporations push to increase our radiation load, putting us on a collision course down this rocky road. In a rush to advance, they have left our pristine world behind, those risk takers, those companies with a one-track mind. They should have steadied their course and not made speed their master. Now the world is in wait of yet another disaster. Wireless nuclear power, it's all akin. Listen to your intuition, that voice deep from within. High technology advances compete with human flesh as we try to dance our way out of a radiation mesh. Radiation can't be seen and it has no taste. In a rush to advance, high-tech haste has made high-tech waste. Stark realities face our world, and not just our nation, due to government leniency or deregulation. Our democracy has been hijacked by those in command. Their negligence and their dreadful power has gotten out of hand. Their human folly as well as their human vanity and their persistent march toward wireless insanity. Some call it the New World Order, the power elite. Auto-determination is what they want to defeat. The secret team, the power elite, works behind the scenes. No matter whom we elect, their end justifies their means. The corporation and the state, those with a one-track mind, to advance their world plan, have left our liberties behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Catherine Herndon. I, too, want to thank Karen for that wonderful presentation she gave. I'm a retired school nurse, and I think I retired just in time because I think I would have been forced to carry a cell phone around with me at some point if I hadn't retired. I am not aware of personal effects of wireless microwave radiation, but I know it is affecting me. And every now and then I have some symptom that makes me wonder, I wonder if this could be because of the smart meters in my building. We're all affected by this, and we need to pay attention to the biological sciences on this, such as what you saw on the screen with the blood cell clumpings. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, I'm sure you're familiar, as are all of our local governments, specifically states that local governments may not take into may not use the possibility or the potential of environmental effects of wireless radiation in denying cell towers. So that has been what every single council and county body has said whenever we have implored them not to continue this proliferation. And I personally have implored every single body to please take it upon yourselves to have the courage to say no to this. Somebody has to stand up for this. Some local government has to have the courage to act in the interests of the people, and I'm asking you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on this topic? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Peter Batur. I also like to make a correction in the minutes. I don't know when that will...
We're going to get to oral communications pretty soon.
Okay. Okay, fine. On this subject, I spoke up about 9 months ago on this subject with smart meters to use Echelon Corporation out of San Jose, force PG&E to use their equipment instead of the Wi-Fi equipment that they're currently using from Belgium. Okay, and it seems to me, I don't know why PG&E picks this Belgian company to provide the smart meters that use RF radiation when they could be using Echelon from over the hill in San Jose, which is also a billion-dollar company that provides the smart meters, but they communicate over their own power lines, and the technology is improved to such a degree that it's actually very accurate. There's no loss of signals like they had before, so they've improved the technology and it works just fine. It seems to me that somebody should force or look into it and perhaps tell PG&E to use this other type of equipment that doesn't radiate, and it's available, and it's sold all around the world using power line, using transmitting the signal over their own lines instead of using the radio frequency. So it seems to me that somebody should look into it and encourage it, especially the former mayor over here who is an electrician, and he would know more about this particular subject, seems to me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Then we'll go on to a report of closed session by Mr. Barasoni, please.
Thank you, Mayor Harlan. The items that the council discussed in closed session this evening are those listed on the council's posted agenda. The council heard from its labor negotiator, Lisa Murphy, with regard to the recently completed negotiations with the Capitola Police Captains Bargaining Unit, and that item is on the council's open session agenda this evening for the council's consideration, the MOU. The council evaluated its city manager, Jamie Goldstein, with respect to specific aspects of his job responsibilities, but took no reportable action in closed session in connection with that job evaluation. The council did not discuss the Schrodel matter in closed session, even though it was listed. And finally, the council heard from Mr. Goldstein and myself with regard to the pending litigation, Ray Ellen Leonard versus City of Capitola, pertaining to injuries sustained by Ms. Leonard in Peary Park. We provided the council with a status report on that lawsuit and took direction from the council with regard to its ongoing defense, but the council took no reportable action in closed session. And that's the end of my oral report.
Thank you very much. The next item is public comments. This is a chance or additions and deletions to the agenda. I don't think we have any tonight. And additional materials, we have a couple of printed items on our desk with a correction of the meeting of September 24th to meeting of October 24th, and item number 9B, and a couple of emails. So the next item is public comments, a chance for anyone to speak to us about anything that they would like. If it's something on the agenda, please wait till we get to it, and then you can speak then. But otherwise, the floor is open. Good evening.
Hi, Mayor and distinguished council from Capitola. My name is Casey Beyer. I'm a senior advisor from the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and I'm here to invite all of you to participate in the 9th annual Applied Materials Silicon Valley Turkey Trot over in San Jose. The first question that you will all ask is, why would someone from Capitola want to come over to San Jose and run a race on Thanksgiving Day morning? Well, here's why. Over the last 8 years, we have raised over $3.2 million for 3 very most needy, worthy charities in San Jose. Second Harvest Food Bank of Santa Clara and San Mateo County, the Housing Trust of Silicon Valley, and the Healthier Kids Foundation of Santa Clara. This year, we have included the fourth beneficiary, which is the Second Harvest Food Bank of Santa Cruz County. We anticipate that we will have about 28,001 runners and walkers, over 1,800 volunteers, and we're anticipating to raise over $850,000 for those 4 charities. It's a fun day, it's a morning event, it's a family event. It's an opportunity for you to run for hope, health, and heart. There's runs within the run. There's kids run for children 2 to 7. There's a quickest cop and fastest firefighter competition, so I'd encourage your city's folks to get your cops and your firefighters over the hill. Virgin American and San Jose Mercury News host a costume contest, so if you feel really lively and you want to get dressed up as a pilgrim or a turkey and come over, and you may win a costume a trip and a flight anywhere that Virgin American flies in the world. And then we have a company that sponsors the food drive. So if you bring a bag of groceries, a bag of canned food, it goes into the Second Harvest Food Banks on site, and we take it over to their distribution centers, both in Watsonville and in San Jose. And for the 5th time, I have a colleague here that's joining me from Brocade to talk about the Mayor's Challenge and kind of a creative and incentive way to get you guys involved to be participants. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Jeff Rangel. I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs for Brocade, and I'm delighted to give you a little bit more information about the Brocade Mayor's Cup. As Casey mentioned, we expect 28,000 people in downtown San Jose from both San Mateo, Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz counties to participate in the Turkey Trot. The Mayor's Cup is an opportunity to encourage all of you to get out with your constituents and other elected leaders to participate in this fun community building event that again benefits 4 great organizations. Basically, based on your registration for the event, you receive points. For the mayor, vice mayor, council members, and planning commission, and city manager, you register and you receive points based on those registration. The percentage of points to those possible gives you the opportunity to earn the Mayor's Cup. The city or town of Los Altos Hills, in your size category, has been the proud displayer of this trophy for a number of years, and this could perhaps be the year that Capitola will take it away from them. They actually already have about 70% of their council registered, so something to consider. You've already seen leaderboards from me and email, and you'll continue to receive those as we get up into the time of the trot, but we encourage you to consider registering. As you do attend the event, you can also go to the VIP tent the morning of the race and visit with other local leaders, elected officials, and community members at the podium and at the VIP tent. So it's a great opportunity to come out and have some fun. It's a 5K or 10K run walk, and again, a great organizations that benefit from your participation. Your Mayor's Cup eligibility is again based on your registration. You don't actually have to go and run, so we encourage you to consider both of those opportunities. To give you, though, also a personal feel to how this benefits your constituents in the local community, Donna from Second Harvest will also speak briefly on the event. I do have to take this back with me, so hopefully you'll see it again as you earn this cup. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
I am Donna Mosich from Second Harvest Food Bank. I'm on the board, and I know some of you from, of course, our competition for the Hunger Fighter of the Year, right? But I'm here tonight to talk about something very simple, which is raising food for Santa Cruz County. This year, of course, we've been invited to participate in the Silicon Valley Turkey Trot. And what that means for us is means 200,000 meals. We're trying to raise $50,000, which would equate to 200,000 meals for this county. And since this year our need is even greater than ever, which is hard to believe, we're asking all of you to help us and trot on Thanksgiving Day over in the Silicon Valley. So you have your literature there. It tells you how to sign up. There's actually a link just to sign up for Santa Cruz County residents so that you'll be counted as part of our Turkey Trot registration. And I believe it's on the brochure that you were given. So we invite you all to come out and trot with us on Thanksgiving morning. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Good evening.
Good evening again. My name is Peter Batur, and I'd like to make a small correction on the minutes, so from the October 10th meeting, and item number 5, I believe it is. It says Peter Batur, Santa Cruz Hostel. I'd like to have that Santa Cruz Hostel stricken because it did not represent the Santa Cruz Hostel on that item. And also 9B, the same thing. Strike you can leave the Santa Cruz, but just cross out the hostel. And I did on the third one where I talked about Rispin Mansion. Yeah, you can leave the hostel in there, but I'd like to have the hostel part stricken because the organization, the nonprofit organization, is not dealing with the water issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak?
Yeah, hi.
Good evening.
Hi. I'd like to speak on this sandwich sign, if that's okay.
We'll have to wait till we get to it.
Oh, you want to wait?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Would anyone else like to speak on any general items? Anything not on the agenda?
So much for that.
Then we'll go on to council, treasurer, and staff comments. Are there any treasurer comments?
I don't know if I need to speak on the check register, signing off on the check register. Isn't there a section in the agenda? Is there a section in the agenda?
We can pull that and then talk about it then.
There's nothing to report other than I signed off on the check register.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you very much. Any staff comments? Yes.
I just want to make an announcement that we have openings on the Hazardous Material Advisory Commission for a vacancy, and we also have a vacancy on the Finance Advisory Commission for a business representative, and we will also have Art and Cultural Commission vacancies at the end of this year. So if anyone's interested, please contact the City Clerk's office.
Thank you very much. And a council member can serve on the Hazardous Materials Advisory Commission. I did that for a number of years, and it was very interesting. It's countywide, and that's when they were dealing with all of the leaking underground storage tanks at the gas stations and making everybody put double containers in there because they didn't have double containers. And we had a big leak up in Scotts Valley from a cleaner and water pollution, and it was I thought it was very interesting. Any other staff comments? Then council comments. Dennis?
As the council's noticed and the public hopefully is noticing that we're in the process of working on Lower Pacific Cove right now. And if anyone has a question about what that property should be used as public use, now's the time to go look at it. It's a fabulous piece of property. You can't go down into it because of the working environment, but you can see it from anywhere up above right now. The value of that property is unspeakable in this community. It's central in its location. It's in walking distance of 3/4 of the population of this city. And we have made a decision to turn it into a temporary parking lot. But if you take one look at this property and see it, you will move with me and a lot of the council members up here that we want to move towards an Upper Pacific Cove parking lot. And this will help base your commitment to having this someday taken back as a community area within our community. So if you get a chance, you can look at it from anywhere along the rim on Beulah or looking from Monterey Avenue. And go look at it. It's worth it. It's a fabulous, fabulous piece of property we have there.
Sam, do you have anything?
No comments.
Ed, do you have anything? Mike?
Halloween parade this Sunday, 1:30, Upper Pacific Cove. Get your costumes gone and come on down.
Even if you don't have children, you'll enjoy it.
Doesn't matter.
It's fun
Doesn't
to see,
matter.
fun to see everything.
Children are optional.
I have two things. The first, I got a letter from Mayor Jason Burnett from the City of Carmel, and he said, included, please find brochures for the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery Capital Campaign. The Veterans Cemetery would be located in the former Fort Ord and serve veterans and their families in the Central Coast region, including Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito, Santa Clara, and San Luis Obispo counties. 20 years ago, our communities made a promise to our veterans for a veterans cemetery. It's time we made good on that promise. Recently, Congressman Sam Farr was able to secure a $6,797,000 grant from the federal government that will be combined with $2 million provided by Sacramento, thanks to Senator Bill Monning, Assemblymember Mark Stone, Speaker John Perez, and Governor Jerry Brown. The local community was charged with raising just over $600,000, and in the past 2 weeks, we have made good progress by raising about half the funds needed. We secured loans to give us more time in raising the remaining funds. While this is great progress, we need your help to continue the effort and raise the full $600,000 to complete the funding. Please consider making a tax-deductible gift to the Veterans Cemetery Capital Campaign and share these brochures with your city council members and your community groups such as the American Legion and other veterans groups. Gifts to the campaign can be made online at www.ccveteranscemetery.org, or you can call Mayor Jason Burnett in Carmel for more information. So I have these brochures, and I have given them to council members, and I will pass them along. They have pictures of the proposed site and a map of it, and some statements by some veterans, and another letter and an editorial and a reply envelope. But this is something that I remember the groups talking about, that there isn't a veteran cemetery around here at all. You have to go over to Los Banos area. So we have the room, we have the money, we need some more money, and I hope you'll be generous and consider making a donation for this worthwhile, very worthwhile effort. The next item I have is just a little report on AB 1229, which was passed by the California Assembly, miraculously passed by the Senate, and went to the governor's desk, but he vetoed it. And it was a bill. Right now, we can mandate that any large development for housing include affordable housing, some units of affordable housing, and we did that a number of years ago. We were actually late. Actually, I think the county had it, City of Santa Cruz had it for years before we adopted it, and I think Dennis brought it to us. And it was a very, very important step forward that we took with our minor projects that we had. We didn't have any big projects going on, to have a few here and a few there and a few there, but they add up and they're very, very important. So this bill would have allowed us to continue to do that, but now that it's been vetoed, we don't have that requirement anymore. And so it's kind of up in the air, but I wanted to read you just a little bit about an editorial that was done in the Mercury News. It says, Californians have a problem with housing. Too many just can't afford it, so they either pass up jobs that are too far from where they can afford to live, or they take them and wind up farther away. Wind up driving too far, clogging the roads, and spewing too much exhaust in the air, or else they double, triple, or quadruple up their families into cramped apartments or garages that can't safely accommodate them. Los Angeles officials tinkered for years with proposals to require developers to reserve a portion of their units for below-market rate housing. Such inclusionary zoning laws would necessarily make it more costly to build here, leading opponents to argue there would be fewer units, not more, offered at affordable rates. Supporters countered that developers were constructing so many high-priced, high-profit apartments and condos that they wouldn't be deterred by the added cost of including affordable units. The back and forth in City Hall seemed endless and the action non-existent. Meanwhile, a third of all municipalities in California zoomed past Los Angeles and adopted inclusionary zoning ordinances, some just for the sale units, others for rental housing as well. Here, city leaders rested on old land use plans that mandated affordable housing only in particular neighborhoods such as downtown adjacent Central City West, where developer Jeff Palmer was building his Piero 2 project. When the city denied Palmer's request for a waiver from the zoning requirement, he sued, asserting that the 1991 city mandate violated a later state law, the 1995 Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act, that limits rent control. Palmer won, rolling back in the process not only LA's very modest affordable housing law, but also all inclusionary zoning laws around the state. Moneyed interests learned their lesson. Instead of fighting local policy decisions, they could get Sacramento to strip cities of the power to make their own laws. The perverse result is that too many local officials have been shielded from responsibility. In Los Angeles, for example, officials no longer have to wrestle with whether to adopt citywide inclusionary zoning. And that's a shame, because whether or not the policy is the best one to increase the stock of affordable housing, the question is a local one that should be answered by local officials. Governor Jerry Brown is now considering whether to sign or veto AB 1229, a bill to authorize cities to require affordable units as a condition of development. Much of Brown's recent incarnation as governor has focused on correcting the faulty division of powers between state and local governments. This bill would help do that. He should sign it and return the burdens and benefits of local government to local governance to local government. So he vetoed it, and he said that it's going to go to it's going to be a Supreme Court case, and he wants to wait and see what that's going to do. So I guess, at some point we need to talk about this. And how are we going to maintain affordable housing here when we don't have that tool? We probably aren't going to have many more large developments, apartments or condos, but we don't have that tool anymore. So I just thought that was very interesting. Any other comments?
Can I just follow up on
Sure.
that? Is the inclusionary housing program part of our update of our general plan zoning ordinance?
Councilmember Norton, as you recall, we have a comprehensive rewrite of the zoning ordinance plan with the general plan update. The housing inclusionary ordinance is found in Chapter 18, which is outside of Chapter 17. We have discussed that internally, whether or not that would be a component, something to look at. There are a number of items that we probably do want to tune up in the housing portion. So my anticipation is that while it's not a part of our zoning ordinance update, it will be something that I would anticipate we look at in the context of an overall rewrite of the general plan.
So there's no need to bring it back to us now and look at our ordinance and see the strength of it right now.
My recommendation is it's not the best time to tackle it. As the mayor pointed out, there have been a number of decisions, Patterson and Palmer, the Palmer case from LA and a Patterson case from the Central Valley. Neither one of them are particularly helpful for local government, and my suggestion at this point is we probably leave well enough alone. But down the road, we are going to want to take a look at our inclusionary ordinance for sure.
If an applicant comes in now for a multi-use development, will they be required to adhere to our inclusionary ordinance as it stands?
We have been applying our inclusionary ordinance to everybody coming.
That it won't change?
We have been applying it, yes.
Yes, okay.
Well, we have, but this just happened. So the question is, where do we stand now?
And that would be something for the city attorney to weigh in on, I think.
I think that decision applies only to rental housing as opposed to for sale housing. So there's still some viability under the law for inclusionary housing.
Okay, well, maybe you could get back to us sometime if there's any other changes, and we could just follow this issue. Great, thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the consent calendar, a group of relatively minor items that we take with one motion, unless someone would like to pull an item for separate discussion, or a member of the audience. We do have a correction for the minutes that we can include in the motion. Would anyone in the public like to pull an item for separate discussion? Would any council member like to pull an item?
I'd like to move the consent calendar with the exception of the check register.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You want to take the check register separately?
No,
And-
somebody else can make the motion. I just want to pull, I'm just going to, there's one item on there that I will not vote for, that's all.
And in the previous motion, we'll note the change that was mentioned. Okay, Dennis, you want to go through the check register?
I'll move, well, if somebody else made the motion, I would just,
You want to do you have a question?
I'm just going to vote no on the Regional 911, 115,000, so.
Well, I'll move to approve the check register.
Second.
And under discussion, and it can be noted, Mr. City Manager, that we've again paid our stellar general plan people $22,000. Before any further checks are cut to those folks, can we require the council to approve those checks specifically before they're signed and mailed?
Councilman Termini, this has been an ongoing issue. We've put in place mechanisms to make sure that we get all the products that we're contractually obligated to receive. These are payments for services that the city is under contract to get. We're going to have a general plan hearing coming up in about 4 weeks, for the council and the planning commission to take a look at it. I think not paying an invoice is not a great option for the city.
I have no doubt that it'll be paid, and I have no doubt that we'll approve paying. I'd like to get some background on what we're paying them for. We keep on giving them 20, 30, 40, 50,000 at a time, and it just seems like whenever they ask us for money, we give it to them. Just in the interest of being good custodians of the city's money, we should know what they're doing for us.
Councilmember Termini, might I suggest maybe a subcommittee of council members could sit down with the community development director, take a look at the scope of work, where we are in the scope of work, what products have been delivered. I think that might help, because there is a detailed scope of work with specific deliverables and timelines, and I think maybe in the absence of seeing that, it could be a tough position to be in up there.
I could almost bet that Councilmember Norton would want to be on that subcommittee.
Oh, I would too. I think we're all interested in it.
Well, obviously we can't have a subcommittee of more than 2 council members, so the other option would be to take a look at the scope of work and have a little bit more of a briefing on where we stand in the overall project.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Just wanted to make that note.
That would be great. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm in favor of the check register with the exception of check number 74302. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is item 10A. Consider an ordinance amending section 10.36.055B of the Capitola Municipal Code pertaining to parking meter rates, accepting the Coastal Commission's modifications. We're continuing that until November 14th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I'm sorry, I should have announced that earlier in the meeting in case there was anyone here that wanted to talk about it. Item B, consider the approval of a contract with JFS Incorporated, DBA Capitola Boat and Bait for the wharf lease and mooring concession agreement.
Good evening, Council. The item before you is with the Boat and Bait Shop, otherwise known as Capitola Mooring and Marine Supply. The contract with the Mooring and Marine Supply expires December 31st of this year. And what we've done is given the age of the...
Those bait people will sneak up on you. Be careful.
It's like a shark.
Yeah. He's so small.
Well, good. I didn't know that was here, so I'll make it brief, and then I'll have Frank give a talk. Anyway, so what we did, because this contract is nearly 20 years old, myself and the city manager, the city attorney went through, and we updated the lease agreement to bring it into the 21st century and upgrade some terms, but overall there's no significant noted changes within the contract. The terms are very much the same. We did up some of the insurance requirements to reflect some new standards. Some of the maintenance requirements, we did update a bit of that. But for the most part, the significance is it's a 5-year term with a 5-year option to renew. The monthly rent, it's the same base rent that we have today, and it increases annually by the CPI. I just want to make sure that the council understands that they do have other options available to them if they decide not to go forward and renew the lease. There are other options you can take. We can go out for an RFP and seek a new provider for those services. if you do choose that route, and I'd be more than happy to explore those with you, but in the meantime, staff is recommending this particular lease agreement for the 5 years, particularly given the history with this organization and the well-run operation that it is. So I'll conclude with that. And Mr. Frank Ely is here as well. He's our tenant. I'm sure you'd like to say something.
Are there any questions of Lisa?
I have no questions, but I think I'd like to bring in further discussion on a more global scale as far as the city leases we have with concessionaires.
It is good to note that we do have some leases coming up in the near future, and I think this will help, at least from my perspective of those that I particularly manage, can have some guidance and direction as how to proceed with those other leases that the city has of city-owned property.
Thank you. Mr. Ely.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Pleasure. I haven't seen any of you for a long time. Anyway, I'm here tonight because I had one thing I wanted to say about the lease, and I'm actually only in business out there originally for 7 months out of a year, and I thought I'd let you understand why the Fish and Game, or Fish and Wildlife now, they close and open seasons all the time. They vary, and it's very costly on us because we have to lay people off or then bring them back and then lay them off again. The rent is so high for us that those periods of the months of 5 months now, we just don't have an income. I go $23,000 plus in debt at the end of the year just because of those 5 months, and that's just really hurting us. I just wanted to ask, like, I'm grateful for the 3 months that you guys have helped with us, and I'm just asking for a little bit more if you could. That's what I'm here for. And that's about it. Other than that, everything else is great.
Are there any questions?
I'm about to launch off into my proposal about we need to put more money into the wharf because we don't want to lose it. If you had to think of a repair or a modification or an enhancement of the wharf, what would you consider the best thing we could do?
Well,
besides make sure it doesn't fall into the sea.
Well, yeah. I mean, no, there's nothing really. Everything's going just fine out there. It just really is. I know we need to replace boards because they're all getting wider gapped. They are breaking, they're cracking because they're so dry because of the elements that are out there. We're losing boards just by trafficking going over it, not just on vehicles, even people walking. I noticed myself walking out there that I've cracked a board. So it's how dry they get. And we could do things like spray them with water all the time, but that is never going to happen for us out there. We know we can't get any pressure out enough to do all that kind of stuff for watering down the boards. That would save them. I really feel that. But as far as everything else out there, my God, the council's been great. The new ladder we got, fantastic, and thank you for all that. I can tell you, it's well appreciated. There was a lawsuit waiting to happen a few times on it, and thank God we got it fixed.
Are there maybe some events we can plan focusing on the wharf during your Fish and Game off season to maybe, I'm trying to look for something to make your business more robust, to help the people who come to visit, the locals, get out to the wharf more. I bet you there are people who have lived here for 5 years who have never walked to the end of the wharf.
There's people 30 years, 35 years that haven't been out there. And when they do come out, they go, oh my God, we've been missing this, you know. I wish there was something in the 5 months, but it's the winter months and they're hard to get anything to go out there. That's the problem.
Got it. Thank you.
We could refer this to the Wharf Committee and have them talk about it.
We could have the Wharf Committee actually meet.
That would be good.
Yeah. Why don't we continue this item and we'll refer it to the Wharf Committee for more discussion and more details.
Well, no, I don't. I'd rather move towards approval. But you know, one of my concerns is, number one, we need to pay attention because we've neglected the wharf. We've done emergency repairs only. We need to start looking at the wharf as one of the places that we do CIP projects, and we need to focus on it. Secondly, I personally like the idea of something not being broken, not fixing it, like the contract with the wharf and not putting it out. I think the Boat and Bait, I think the Wharf House Restaurant, And I think even Matt Arthur's trailer on the beach should all be the kind of things that just happen year after year until they don't want them to happen anymore. We have something that's working well. We have 3 great operators there. I think it should be our form as a city to continue that unless, that particular concessionaire decides not to do it. I don't think there's any reason to go through the process of, better the devil we know. I don't know. Let's just keep on going with what we've got.
Ed.
Question. The 3 months that we do not charge rent, what months are those?
I was just going to actually bring that up. The way that worked was we had the original agreement, and what I wanted to make note to the council was that we had amended the contract to extend it 5 times, and each time we amended it, we waived the rent for, it was December, January, and February. I did not include that in here, and I meant to make mention of that because it was never part of the standard lease. It was always Frank would come, ask for that as part of the amendment, and I wanted to make you aware that what he's asking for, even the original 3 months that we had done on a year-to-year basis, was not included in the base agreement. So if you want to make note of any of those changes, please let me know.
I want to know what the other 2
December,
months
January, and February were the
3.
months that we were
what
doing.
months comprise the other 2?
Well, December, January, February, and March, we have nothing at all, and actually even April, where we have nothing. There's no business. We can't fish for anything at all until May 1st.
Can people fish from the wharf?
They fish from the wharf, but there, not a lot of people to sustain the business. I mean, if I have to hire 2 people out there and keep them going, no, I don't have enough money coming in for that. I just use it out of my savings.
Stephanie?
Dennis.
Well, I can see given the 4th month because March is a dead season. April, salmon season starts in April, right, Frank?
And
that's May. In May. So you'd be ready in April. So
they change it all the time. So
okay,
that's my problem.
Okay. We're kind of seeing an evolution, maybe brought on a little bit by the whales, of the fact that people are starting to use other vehicles to go out on the bay, and the wharf is a wonderful access for like stand-up paddling, those type of businesses, and maybe we should encourage Frank to actually expand on that, him being able to work into storage of that type of thing, or make his business a little more viable, give him a little more open door to be able to make it more viable. The fishing business is kind of a roller coaster. 2 years ago we had the greatest salmon season ever. This year it was kind of off and on. But the whales being the last month has really helped his boat rental. So there's an up and down business along with this. And so we take for granted the fact that we have a custodian out there that watches the wharf all the time. Frank and his crew are always out there. They're kind of the peacekeepers, or the watchers of the wharf. Yeah. I know that our public works goes out there and takes care of trash cans and that type of thing. But other than that, and Rudy, correct me if I'm wrong, we really don't have a lot of policing that we have to do on the wharf, and it's a public attraction. And so his staff and his people that work out there are the custodians of that pier. Let's don't also forget that it was 30 years ago this year that the ocean took that pier. And we've been very fortunate. I mean, 30 years is a long period. That was an El Nino year. We don't see an El Nino coming, hopefully, but it is very susceptible to those type of damages. I see a lot of abuse of driving out onto the pier. And I understand employees, and I understand that people work in delivery and stuff. But people have gotten to know now that if you have an ADA license or you drive out there, you're probably going to get by without doing it because we don't police it much. We don't enforce that. And so if anything is damaging the planking, it's probably the first course. Certainly you watch cars drive over it now. It's getting bad again. And that was right after. It was in '82 that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, it was '82 that we did all the planking work out there. We did some pier work since then. So I would be in favor of allowing a 4-month window of no rent, and we encourage Frank to find ways to expand his business that makes it more viable. Give him an option to do some kind of storage work out there on the pier too for stand-up surfboards would be the first one I think of.
Right. Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I had a question for staff. I wasn't quite, because I noticed when I read the lease, and I know we've given the waiver of the 3 months during the winter months for the past several years, and that's not built into the lease agreement. Is it intended that it's going to be built in at some point, or Mr. Ely's going to come annually and ask the council for the waiver each year?
I think that's an option that you can do tonight. If this is something you want to build in to this lease agreement, then we can do it. I didn't put it in because I wanted to try to keep mirroring the same process and let the council have that option to choose whether or not they wanted to allow that. But we can certainly include that in here. It's by no means a done deal until the council approves it.
Right. Well, it would seem, because there's also language in here about non-operation and some penalty clauses to the tenant for non-operation. So those would also have to be, I think, dealt with. And it seemed like it would be kind of cumbersome to do it year after year. A follow-up question to the staff. Are you ready for us to approve a 4-month waiver of rent?
We've been doing the 3 months for the past
Right.
5 years. If you included a fourth, that's an additional $3,000. We haven't looked at the budget, but I can tell you that in this particular budget right now that we're in, it does account for the 3 months.
My suggestion would be to continue the format of the annual waiver. We've sort of established it and it seems to work out okay. Do keep in mind that unfortunately the Wharf Fund, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but I believe it operates in the negative. So this, a 4th month does, it means that the Wharf needs a general fund subsidy. It's not necessary, that's a policy call. I mean, that's clearly a policy call. But the goal has been, I believe historically the goal has been to have the Wharf operate sort of as an enterprise fund, independent and functionally, fiscally sustainable on its own. We haven't quite been able to get there, but it's a policy call. And certainly one your council can make tonight, whether it's 3 months, either build it into the lease or not. My suggestion is keep it out. I think we have a good system, and give us direction on whether it's 3 or 4.
If I can.
Yeah, I was going to, is that acceptable to you, Mr. Ely?
Yeah, well, the thing of it is if the Fish and Wildlife ever does open it back up to a 12-month season, like it always has been before, then of course I would be, more than happy to just waiver all this other and go back to the normal. And that's all I'm asking for right now until something direct or definite happens to the fishery. I have to go on that basis right now. My kayaks and if I get stand-up boards or whatever other play toys that I'm looking at, in those months, I don't think is going to support it all the time. It's just going to be on good days. That's the problem there.
Well, the problem with not having it in the lease, though, is that next year when you have a different council, they're going to be kind of confused by the whole thing. So I would.
It should be codified in the lease, and we should make a decision. And this is Frank's rent's never been the big money maker for Capitola. I mean, let's be serious about this. $3,000 really? I can go either way. Just leave it at 3, go to 4.
This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this issue? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back.
So I have a question, Michael. In your suggestion, you're stating that we should go with no limitations on the year, so at least there's no review or...
Well, we could have a review. We need to leave it to staff and not launch off every time or every year or every 3 years into an RFP situation. Let's just make it, unless a future council decides to do something different, let's let staff continue on with the process of lease renewal based on good performance, and continued services. Certainly, if for something goes wrong and all of a sudden, Frank's open 1 day a week, 3 months out of the year, we're going to need to do something. But as it goes along, let's leave it all the way it is for all 3 leases.
Okay, I'll make a motion then.
I think the city attorney has waved his hands around. It always makes me nervous.
I just said if there was an interest of sort of memorializing the arrangement that we've historically adhered to and memorializing it in the lease like you mentioned, we could probably work on some type of term that corresponds the lease payment obligation to the fishing season or something of that nature.
I think that's a great, that would make me lean more towards the 4-month, so that if Fish and Game does open it up for an additional month, we could throttle back to the 3, and it could just be an automatic thing within the lease.
Well, let's go with the mayor's suggestion, and she says we bring it back, but we give direction to the council that they work on a longer-term lease agreement that incorporates 4 months.
Right.
And that we look at having that written into the lease agreement based on fish availability. I don't know.
Fishability?
Fishability.
Can we, and if we're going to send this back and the staff's going to come back to us, can we also add to your motion the idea that the other 2 city leases that we give out take the same format?
Okay, that'd be fine. And
those other leases aren't before us tonight.
No, they're not, but staff has been asking us for direction on their process in general. And I'm thinking...
This is just as direction to staff about how to approach the other leases.
With all of these, you have to make a decision.
I'm responding to staff's request to how we're going to proceed, not only in this lease, but in other leases we have.
Okay, and then also in the motion, we will try and meet as the WRF committee and discuss some of the issues that we have on the WRF right now, then, too.
I have a question. Jamie brought up a great point about the WRF budget running at a negative. Jamie, this might be a silly one, but how does money get into the WRF fund?
WRF fund primarily is funded through this and the other concessionaires on the lease, right. on the WRF, right?
Good evening, Council and Treasurer. Yeah, the WRF fund is solely funded at this point by the 2 leases of the wharf out there. So it's the restaurant and the boat and bait shop. And historically, the wharf fund can cover the year-to-year operations of the wharf, our maintenance efforts, minor repairs there. Where we run into trouble is if there's a storm event, takes out some pilings, damages one of the buildings. Typically, the wharf fund does not have enough funding to make those kind of repairs. So the capital improvements out there typically need outside funding beyond the wharf fund. And if I can...
The 2 proprietors of the building, Steve, do they take care of their own buildings, though, the actual physical structure?
The interior part, we are responsible for painting, and, you know, windows go bad or something like that out there, we're responsible for those. I think the best thing we could do out in the wharf would be to build a new set of bathrooms and open the restroom up to a view to the west.
Nice.
Beautiful.
And that's really what we need to do. We've looked at it. It's about a $300,000 project. So we've never quite got the funds together to do it. But the other thing would be to replace some more pilings, not wait for them to fail, to start replacing them.
And maybe that could be part of our CIP program sometime in the near future, pilings, planks. We never have been able to retrieve the rent to balance true repairs, because every time you add a piling, it's $100,000.
Right.
Or any way to build into the budget, into the CIP area wharf fund? I just feel uncomfortable giving another month when we're already running that at a negative, even if we were to just kind of have a little CIP fund into the budget.
We can always put money in. We always cover the expenses and put money into it when we need to.
Instead of being retroactive and then putting money there, I just wanted it to be a little bit more proactive.
I know. What we've done is when it needs to be painted, we paint it, and if there's not enough money in the wharf fund, we just take it out of the general fund.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but in the general maintenance, the wharf fund pretty much can handle that.
Yeah, year to year we're fine. It's the extraordinary expenses that we can't cover.
Yeah, and that's what has to go into our CIP.
Yeah, and we do have, the wharf is a small section of our CIP budget. Right now it's unprogrammed, but I think I have the restrooms on there and the piling project. I'd have to look again. But so we do have it in the CIP, and we continue to list it there.
Great.
Ed?
Yeah, if I might, I'm getting a little distracted. We're here to talk about a lease for the boathouse, and we've kind of jumped all over the planet on things that I am not prepared to talk about tonight. I'm really not comfortable talking about anybody else's lease or improvements. I think if that's something we want to agendize and discuss, I'd love to have that conversation, but for right now,
It's nothing that we can decide on. I just, like I said, just responding to staff's
yeah,
request.
we're starting to leapfrog all over the place. I'm more than comfortable with offering the fourth month. I'd like to have it, I would like to leave the lease like it is, my personal opinion. I have no problem with coming in every year and discussing how the season's going and what we need to allocate for. I mean, it seems like he's going to tell us exactly what he needs. I just think for simplicity, to leave the lease as it is and for us to deal with him every year. It's a pleasure to have him come in here and talk to us and let us know what the wharf needs, as we found out, so.
But the problem is, he's going to be looking at different faces next year or in the year after, and they're not going to have the history, they're not going to...
Well, not next year.
But I've seen them different almost every year. It seems like, I don't see anybody hardly anymore. We don't have a wharf committee like we used to. Yeah. As you well remember, Mayor.
Yeah.
Council, as a potential middle ground, I mean, my recommendation is, as Councilman Dubato pointed out, is keep it the way it is, and we can deal with these on a year-by-year basis. And obviously, we can write in extensions, which can be granted at a staff level, provided that the services rendered are consistent with the lease. As an alternative to writing the 4 months waiver into the lease, potentially we could have it that there was staff authority to grant that at a staff level, to grant that waiver, provided that the conditions hadn't substantially changed in the fishing season or things like that. It'd keep it off your agenda, but it still would allow that safety valve.
I like that. Let's keep in mind this is a 5-year lease we're setting to approve, which I'm perfectly in tune with. And again, I'm not interested in getting a big public or council discussion on all the other leases, but I think that staff needs to come back to us with something on an efficient, effective way to deal with all three of these.
Let's do that outside of the motion then.
Yeah, that's a total staff direction, nothing to do with this motion as far as deciding. That wasn't my intention.
I think we ought to have it in the lease, because otherwise, because that way would give him some security, knowing that he's not going to have to worry about it for 5 years. Because it was originally done because of the weather, I think, because you said that in those winter months there's nobody out there. The weather is stormy. Of course, we haven't had storms like that for years. But there was the weather, and that there wasn't any business, and so we would not charge him rent for 3 months during the winter time. And so, for him to have to come in every year and ask for that just seems really awkward.
Madam Mayor, there's a motion on the floor. And my motion was that we have staff arrange a long-term lease, and that we increase from 3 months to 4 months, the months that he's not required to pay rent, while the fishing seasons are as they are, and at any time staff could bring this discussion of our agreement back to us. So that's my motion.
Can I get a clarification on the motion? So, at any time staff could bring the discussion back to us, there's going to be a condition placed into the lease that the council could change it at a future date based on that discussion? Because otherwise, I mean, there would be no point in us discussing it unless there's some ability to modify the lease. So I would like to get clarification about that. And also, on the 4 months, Dennis, is it your intention that the lease we are building in here a 4-month kind of gap of operations and rental payments for every year of the lease?
That is correct, unless fishing conditions change where they're opening more hours.
Right.
And so, yes, I think you're correct, Sam. There should be some way that we can modify this lease agreement if we brought it back. If staff sees the need to bring it up next year with us, they have the right to do that. Otherwise, we're going.
How would you modify a signed lease, though?
John?
Well, you'd have to do an amendment. Just both the signatories do an amendment to the lease. That's how you modify it.
But if one party doesn't want to do it, then it's not going to happen.
Correct.
This can always come back to us on consent. The modified lease come back on consent.
Dennis, I think by keeping the 4 months out of it, it gives you that ability then. If you keep it out of the lease, you grant it every year, obviously then you have more negotiating power down the road.
It becomes a yearly amendment. Which, does that simplify, our idea is to
That's- no,
simplify
that's-
the lease. No, we're with you. We love you as a tenant. The idea is to simplify the lease, isn't that
Yes,
what we're
no,
trying
I
to
agree
accomplish?
100%. That sounds fine with me.
And you even said, you may want to come back and have a longer season, but for right
Hey,
now, it's not happening.
it's not, yeah.
And we understand that.
I'm open to that, Jamie. I think that's fine.
Okay.
You know, that they do it, and then if there is some agreement between staff and Frank that things have changed, then you can bring it back at that time. But we're given direction that we would like to see a 4-month lease.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we'll bring this back on consent.
Okay.
Okay, so make sure we get it all, the terms right.
We get a second?
We don't have a
I
second.
was the second.
Thank you so much.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I'd like the WRF committee to meet and talk about issues. And we have 2 council members on that. Okay, I'd like you to meet with the tenants and talk about what's going on out there, and talk with Mr. Jesberg. It's probably time that we paint it, and what's the schedule, and what's the thinking about the repairs and long-term use and bathrooms and so forth.
It's nice to get Willie back into town, too.
Yeah, we were dragging him back in here.
Okay, good. Well, we'll go on to the next item, which is item C, consider an ordinance repealing section 17.57.020B4, 17.57.060F, and 17.57.040D pertaining to the use of sidewalk signs in the Central Village zoning district and of this Capitola Municipal Code. First reading. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Harlan and City Council members. Tonight we're going to give you an update on the village sidewalk signs and displays. Back in 2011, staff had done an enforcement effort throughout the village and also along 41st Avenue. Following the enforcement effort, the Village Business Improvement Association, the BIA, came into the City Council and requested that staff work with the BIA on finding a solution to the ongoing sidewalk signs. And after a year working with the BIA, last July, the City Council approved the sidewalk signs. And it was for a specific criteria for a sidewalk sign based on a committee design. Over a year has passed since the original design was approved. It was a pedestal sign. And our update to you tonight is that we have received no applications for the approved sign. It was an administrative sign permit over the counter, and it also required an encroachment permit. The sign was a double-sided pole-mounted sign, as you can see on the screen. It was 18 inches wide with a maximum of height of 58 inches. And they were going to be attached within the sidewalk, so that's why there was an encroachment permit. Rich and myself, we reached out to different members of the community and have discussed why we have not seen applications. And there was a mix of input from business owners and residents in the district, in the village. There was definitely, from business owners, we heard there's a need for these signs to convey daily messages such as specials, sales, whether or not certain seating is open in the restaurants. Also, we heard some discussion on the variety of style and craftsmanship, that there are some very nice signs out there, and there are also other signs that people thought were inappropriate for the village, and that there was an issue with creating clutter in the sidewalks. Also, the sidewalk displays, because there's no set criteria for them, there's a variety of different sidewalk sales and displays out there, as well as the signs that are out there creating clutter in the sidewalks, liability issues that arise, and then the other opinion that we heard was that the new sign is too expensive. The permitting process is about $200 within the city between the encroachment permit and the over-the-counter permit, and then the liability insurance, and then the cost of the new sign adds up quickly. So tonight our recommendation from staff is to repeal the existing ordinance, since we have not received any applications to date, and it's been over a year. And then we'd also like to receive direction from the City Council regarding future code enforcement. And we've outlined 2 administrative models. One's a proactive enforcement model, and the second is a complaint-based model. Throughout the past year, we've been working on a complaint-based model, and there's been little enforcement that's occurred. The first model for proactive enforcement would initially there'd be a public outreach with a set deadline. We're thinking of sending out notices a month in advance and outlining what the code allows in terms of and what the code allows in terms of signs in the village, and then setting a deadline. Once that deadline has been hit, I would go out and inventory the village and send notices of violation to anyone that was not up to code after the 1 month notice, and then past the deadline. And then following that, we would have enforcement. And enforcement would be removal if any signs were in the right-of-way, and then citations if signs were on private property, or if there was a public display of goods that did not have a conditional use permit, that would also receive a citation. Within the complaint-based model, it's basically the same, except for we don't do the proactive reach out to the community. Once we receive a complaint, we'd send out a notice of violation and then follow up with either removal or a citation. So, thank you.
Questions? Mike?
Would you go back to the part where a sign or a display of merchandise may be not on a city sidewalk but on the private property of the business owner? How do we approach that? And do we have and I'm thinking of the Big Kahuna, a rack of Hawaiian shirts, it's off the right-of-way, it's on the private property, or the sign in front of Mr. Toots, not on the right-of-way, on private property. How do we feel about stepping over that line? And I'm conflicted on that.
For any sign that is on a building or is visible, we have regulations for, a wall sign is regulated through the city, any projecting signs. So the fact that it's not on the right-of-way and it's on the public property, we still have the ability to regulate that sign.
What about the rack of Hawaiian shirts?
Any outdoor display requires a conditional use permit in the district, so the zoning rules for it would apply.
If Hot Feet were to put hurricane doors in the front of their store and literally open the front of their store, do all of their shoes now become outdoor displays?
I don't think they would. I don't think they would. I think that outdoor becomes outside of the confines of the store. What you saw there was in the proactive code enforcement model. I think council understands very well that the code enforcement is a cauldron of time suck. It can take up as much staff time as we can ever put into it. And so what we were trying to put together was something that was relatively streamlined and would require just put simple rules out there that everybody could understand. And the basic thinking was, look, if you had an outdoor display or you had an A-frame type sign, if it's in the public right-of-way, you're going to get notified that you need to move it or we're taking it. And if it's on private property, we'll write a citation. And we're not going to get in the letter writing business, not in this game of, you have to take it away and they take it in the store and then it comes back. Just a really streamlined program. That's the proactive model. The other model, I think, is a complaint-based model. And I think we just have to be clear about which way we're going to operate, because it's challenging for staff to understand how we're going to be able to attack these things and try to do it, if we're going to do it, in a way that doesn't take up so much staff time that it overwhelms other priorities for the city.
Other questions? Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The one thing I have a little bit of trouble with, Jamie, because part of the staff recommendation is repealing our previous sign ordinance, which was the alternative, which we went through a great deal of effort and time and analysis and discussion to establish. And if we get rid of that and then go into enforcement, ever of one of the two choices, ever how you do it, there seems to be left with no fallback. There's nothing for the merchants to be able to do, unless it's to put it on their building, I guess. There's no kinds of sidewalk signs now that they would be able to use. So I was wondering if you could discuss, if I'd always thought that when we did the new ordinance and the new signs, it was going to take a little bit of code enforcement to push people in that direction. And it seems like it takes a little combination of both to make our new ordinance maybe work better. And so I would like for you to speak to that, and maybe whatever kind of enforcement we do, and maybe we could ratchet up, but we leave our existing ordinance in place so that there is an alternative for the merchants to be able to utilize. And the question on the fees, the design and fabrication of the sign, that's a one-time fee, right? The sign permit application, that's a one-time fee?
One-time fee.
And the public works encroachment permit is a one-time fee. So all these are one-time capital costs which could be amortized over 5, 10 years, multiple
Correct.
years of business. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Story, I mean, I think what you need, what I would suggest keeping in mind is that there are multiple options, and very few jurisdictions that we have found allow the placement of material on the street, whether it's an A-frame sign, a sidewalk sign, outdoor displays, or if they do allow outdoor displays, they're allowed under some sort of use permit. And our code, when we look at it, actually does provide quite a bit of flexibility, and there's an attachment to the staff report. It's on page 135, labeled 131 of the staff report, and I was going to try to put it up to show the different types of signs that are allowed within the code. We have the blade signs, which are signs that project out perpendicular from a building and are considered pedestrian oriented. Obviously wall signs, window display signs, menu boards. So there are a lot of options within the code. What we don't have outside of the sidewalk signs are the allowance to place things basically in the right of way on the street. And that's relatively uncommon from my experience, that a jurisdiction does have a program to allow that.
And on the slide,
I've
I've included all of the allowed signs in the village.
But all that was discussed with the merchants when they were here about these other options. And I'm just concerned that now if we repeal this ability completely and throw them back to saying, well, this is all you can do, that they're going to be back in this room. And before that, I guess I would like to have a more noticing of them. And because this was all very exhaustively discussed, that you could do these signs. And the reason we went with this, because we heard that they needed to have these sidewalk signs in order to attract business, that these other options did not really work for them. So I just have concern about that, and I guess, and I'm all for, approaching this and trying to beef up our enforcement, but it seems to me a bit premature to repeal the existing ordinance that we established.
Could we not, I know this isn't a staff recommendation, could we not leave everything in place the way it is and just direct you to do a complaint-based enforcement and leave it at that without repealing and redrawing the ordinance?
You recall that when we adopted the sidewalk sign ordinance, there was a 1-year review. So that's sort of what's precipitated this hearing. Yes, absolutely. You could say, conclude the 1-year review, that we want to leave that piece of code in place and give us direction that a complaint-based approach to this is the way you'd like to go. That's certainly an option.
Well, there are some signs that are going to violate ADA, and I think, if staff observes those, that they shouldn't wait till somebody else complains before giving notice about that. So I don't think we should be passive in every circumstance. But if there are signs that are visibly seen to block the right-of-way that put us in violation of ADA requirements, we should take affirmative action, not wait till a member of the public files a complaint. So maybe a little bit of hybrid of both of those.
I think that falls under the heading of a different violation. And I think that if we keep that out of the sign discussion, and because certainly an ADA is a proactive form of enforcement and should be done. and we have the ability to do that. But with regard to, because frankly, nothing in the village really turns my blood cold, or, anybody in this room been scandalized by the fact there's a couple of dozen pairs of shoes on a ledge, or that there's a rack of Hawaiian
Yeah,
shirts?
I think it looks
serious.
tacky. I think it really looks tacky.
I don't want to be the tacky place. I'm sorry, because if you've ever walked down the street in Lahaina, I'll say it. I'll just leave it at that. We're not Lahaina, but we're talking about Sandwich Board City. That's the gold standard. I just don't know that I want to be the arbiter of what looks classy and what doesn't. I don't want to live in a city like that.
Well, we're not talking about that, though. We're talking about just enforcing the rules that we have that say that you need to get a permit to have a sidewalk sale. And the village people have done that in the past. Yeah. They've had sidewalk sales. They used to have one once a year or so. But, after going to some of the league conferences and sitting on the sessions about economic development, when people can choose to go here, or they can choose there, or they can choose to go someplace else, I think it behooves us to look as good as we possibly can, and to have attractive stores and attractive storefronts. They don't need to put their merchandise out. They don't need to have all that extra stuff outside, sitting around. Dennis.
No, I'd like to hear the public.
I know, this is a public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to speak? Please come up.
At least somebody will listen to me, okay? Peter, but anyway, if I would be a merchant here, I'd do it like in Santa Cruz, a few locations. There's a pizza guy with pizza, a human advertising sign, and there doesn't seem to be any ordinance against that. There's also a haircutting place on near the Rio Theater, and a pizza place down by the beach, and they have guys out there with signs and waving them around, and that seems to be a freedom of expression, so you can't really stop that. So that's what I would do if I would be a merchant in Capitola and would like to have a sign without paying anything for it.
We do have, the cupcake lady does have someone that does that.
Yeah. How adorable is that?
Good evening. Thanks for waiting.
Sure. I thought I'd get out here early. Apparently not. Any rate, my name's Carl Hyman. I own Mr. Pete's Coffee House. I'm on the BIA, and I spoke in front of you before. And first of all, I would just like to state that the Sandwich Board, the sidewalk signs do help. It helps my business. It helps other businesses. That's why they're out there. And I can tell you by the numbers, it does help. So I'd really appreciate it if the staff and the council can help businesses with this. Secondly, I think that from a top view, we just really need to look at this whole situation and see how big a problem is this really. I mean, there's so many other things to deal with in this city, and we're spending so much time on this. How many signs are actually out there? Has anybody counted?
I did. I spent a couple hours one day, made a very long list that I gave to the city.
I was
throughout
out there
the city.
Throughout the city. I was in the village because I'm understanding this is just a village thing, right? So in the village yesterday, I counted 4 signs, right? I went out in the summer. I think I sent you guys all an email. I think I counted 9 of them out there in the summer. So really, how big a problem is this? Have we had complaints about them? Has people been injured? Versus how much it helps the business. And then just, I'm hearing people comment on, the beauty of the city and how you want it to look nice. Everybody wants it to look nice, but that's subjective. My nice is different than your nice, than is different than your nice and what you like. So, making ordinances on subjective opinions is a little bit difficult. But after reading the staff report and stuff, and hearing what Sam suggests, I like what you suggest, if we can just leave that in there, maybe not use it, and then go with a complaint-based system and or ordinance. And that way, the signs that are a problem will get dealt with, right? If there is an ADA issue, it'll be a problem. If someone trips over it, they'll get a complaint. If it's in the right of way, someone will complain about it, and then we deal with it. So as a business owner, that's the way I think I'd like to see it, because the signs do help. If we can keep them out there, it helps the businesses. So that's all I have, I think. So, and there's one other thing, Sam. There is a recurring cost. It's the $1 million liability insurance.
Yes.
So that has to be incurred every year. So. Okay. Great. Well, thanks for your time, and keep the businesses in mind, please.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak?
I'll speak as well. My name is Michael Levine.
Please wait till you get to the microphone because otherwise people at home can't hear you. Thanks.
Michael Levine, broker, realtor with Michael Levine Real Estate Services. I also worked with Carl and some of the other members of the business community, some of the members of the council that participated. Ed was active before he was on the council. I think we came up with what we thought was a sign that accommodated the council's concerns. We tweaked it a couple of times. And I think the feeling in the business community was that when it came up for approval, there were fees that were added on that nobody was made aware of. There was a requirement for insurance policy that nobody was made aware of in the business community. And I think it irritated a lot of people who had intended to participate and just said, the heck with it. And I would encourage an approach that, given the few number of signs we're talking about in the village, why have $300 worth of fees? Does it really require that much staff time to process an application for a uniform sign? So I think it might be wise for the council to think about proactively what can you do to encourage people to adopt rather than discouraging them. That's it.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll close the public hearing, bring it back. Dennis?
Where do we go wrong? This process, and I'm not talking about the complaint or I'm talking about the sign addendum we did as a city to this. We went through 2 large meetings. We had recommendation from our planning commission and I think our staff to deny this application. We heard from the British merchants how much they needed this. We responded as a city council and we gave them what they asked on this thing. Now, I'm not talking about the fees. I'm not sure what the fees are. The cost of signs, and this is not unusual. This is the cost of sign if you had it on your building or you had it out in the street. The fee for the city fee may be an issue with this, but we gave them the opportunity they asked us to do. And so, as a council, we responded to the needs of that community there. And we did exactly what they asked us to do. Maybe not exactly the size they wanted, but we had an issue also with getting people down a narrow sidewalk and keeping it open at the time. My point I'm getting to is that somehow we failed in the process here. And the Planning Commission did recommend denial on this. They said that it wasn't dealt with now. We should deal with it at the time we deal with the whole sign ordinance for the village, in which we probably should have. And that it appears to me that we've offered something that nobody wants. So there's no sense in having a sign ordinance that provides something that nobody has a need for. And I think that this council did the right thing, and they gave that community down there what they asked for. And so I'm a little disappointed. I'm disappointed in the council's actions, and I'm disappointed in the BIA. For coming to us and taking us through a large process and taking city and staff time to have something that isn't wanted or isn't to their needs. And so I'm open to whatever way we go on this thing, but I think it should be a play basis probably on that end of it. But I think we need to look at our process and how we approve things, and maybe this council should stay out of the design business. Every time something comes to it, don't get involved in design. Send it back to staff. And come back with the staff. Well, we did that night, if you remember, and I'm as guilty as anyone is we designed the signs for them. We said it can only be this width because we need to have this much room, and it's got to be this high. And so we gave them all design parameters that probably doesn't fit to them. So hopefully we'll learn from this process on this.
Well, the Planning Commission also denied it because the majority felt that they didn't want to have sandwich board signs in the village, period, that they were tacky.
What about when did the insurance come into this? I'm at a loss because I don't remember the discussion entailing $100,000 or $1 million worth of insurance. I think it's maybe belt and suspenders, but why are we putting the merchants through an extra insurance rider? I think that's where we went wrong. We didn't go wrong. We just let it, and staff did what staff does.
The public hearing is closed, but if you'd like to speak, go right ahead.
I'm just sorry that the person with the least obtrusive sign in this whole city is the only person who showed up here. That's Carl. That the sign is off the city sidewalk. It's sitting next to his door, and it actually looks good. And he's the guy we get to come here.
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Kimber DeMartin, and I am a sign shop owner. in Soquel Village, and I spoke with Katie before the meeting, and I have a lot of customers who are business owners in the village, and they come to me and say, do you know what kind of sign I can have, and can I put a little one here in the dirt that's not on the sidewalk? And so, you know, they're saying we don't know what the rules are, we don't know what our options are, and or who we even talk to. But I just wanted to introduce myself to the council and let you know that I'm available for if you have any signage questions on costs or heights, or I don't know if any other sign companies have approached the council and you know, offered up services. So I just wanted to introduce myself.
Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
I'm going to chime in here. When this was discussed last time, I was on the other side of the fence. In fact, I think I was helping represent the business people. In fact, the sign right now is sitting in my house. I still have the original sign.
That's where we went wrong.
I was almost going to bring it tonight, but my better judgment side neglected that. Mike brings up a good point, because I want to, you know, the businesses wanted the sign. I think that they had good reason to believe that the sign helped their business. And we went into so many designs. And Dennis, you hit the nail on the head. I wish the council wasn't in the design business or the planning commission. Okay, I think it was hard enough just for the businesses to decide on what kind of a sign they wanted to represent, what they thought looked good, because we all just have a different opinion on that. The sign got tweaked so many times, and I believe what the final straw was when we came to the last meeting, there were some dimensions that were given to the committee. They followed those dimensions. At the last meeting, it was changed again, and I believe the business people felt they got sucker punched. And this $1 million liability came on top of it, and I think they said, holy cow, this turned into like a $750 fee. And, you know, Sam makes a good point. You know, if it's a one-time cost and you can, you know, amortize it, maybe that's reasonable, you know, but it's the ongoing costs and why all of a sudden it turned into this giant windstorm. So they were frustrated, and that's why they went away, and I believe that's why nobody built a sign, and I think people just decided to put up their signs and take their best chance, and that's what they've done. And, you know, I don't think there's any new signs in the village. I think the numbers are about right. There's somewhere between 5 and 10 depending on the season. And some are on private property, and some are, you know, so minor, and some are right in the ADA walkway. So, you know, we do have an obligation, you know, and that was the one thing we tried to come up with. I think at this point, it doesn't do anybody any good to repeal it, because then they have no option. I hate to say that they could bring back another sign amendment and try to, you know, to alter the sign, but to take away the option to have one leaves them with nothing except for just violating. And I think if we're going to do anything, it should be on a complaint basis only. That's all I have to offer at this point. So.
Right.
Well, I think it ought to be part of our work program, because then you go to somebody and you say, you got to take your sign. Well, what about his? What about hers? You know, I think it's just much easier to have staff, just as part of their job, they do that enforcement. That's what we've done in the past, and it worked well for years, and then we let it go. I mean, it does take their time, but it's a perfect job for an intern or summer intern or someone else.
We make the insurance requirement go away.
You know, that insurance requirement makes a lot of sense. You're placing an obstacle in the public right-of-way. The city's going to be the first one to get sued. The property owner who placed the article in the right-of-way with the city will get sued as well. Having the insurance requirement, basically what you do is you go to your broker and you get the city named as an additional insured. There's not going to be a business that's operating responsibly in the village that doesn't already have a policy of commercial general liability insurance.
So it shouldn't cost them any more.
It might cost them a little more to get an endorsement adding the city as an additional insured, but with that endorsement, the city tenders the lawsuit to the property owner, and
Right.
the property owner's insurance covers both the city.
So it's an additionally insured rider or endorsement that we're looking for, not necessarily a brand new policy. And maybe there's a communication problem here with the village merchants, that they thought they had to go out and purchase a brand new $1 million liability policy. So this could be a big misunderstanding. And a hold harmless agreement, is that
Yeah, what you would normally do is you'd put when they sign the application, they agree to hold harmless and indemnify the city, and then you ask them to provide you with a certificate of insurance naming the city as an additional assured on a commercial liability policy. And I think that's all it was intended.
Yeah, the city attorney is correct, and
Okay, that makes sense, and maybe
Right.
we just haven't explained it properly.
right. Yeah, I mean, our insurance carrier would have a problem with us if we were granting encroachment permits and not getting this type of coverage for private improvements.
Yeah,
Speaking of
Jamie
encroachment
just hit
permits.
it on the head. It's the standard condition of our encroachment permit. I think that's probably why it wasn't a discussion in the earlier sign-in. We said they had to get an encroachment permit, and that is a standard condition of any encroachment permit in the city, is that we have this, they prove that they have liability insurance, and they name us as additional insured. So we do that with every contractor that works in the city, anybody who places anything in the right-of-way, if they pull a permit, any of those. When we typically issue an encroachment permit, that is a standard requirement.
Steve, before you, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
The sign permit application of $127, that's actually lower than you would pay for a blade sign or something on the side of your building.
Yeah, so if you
So
were
it's a lowered fee already.
It is, yep. Typically, to go before the Planning Commission for a review of your sign application, it's, I want to say about $500.
So, you know, I
We need
don't
some-
see any roadblocks here.
Right, we need some better
The
education.
roadblocks may be in the design itself, like Ed said. Maybe that is the roadblock.
Right.
That doesn't correct anything. So,
Yeah, Steve, I wanted to ask you about the $1 million limit. Is that the standard amount for this type of encroachment permit, where you're mostly dealing with pedestrians? Could it be a lower limit of liability? Because I could see that maybe some of I imagine all responsible merchants have some kind of liability insurance. They may not all have $1 million policy. They may have a $300,000 policy. They may have a $500,000 policy. And this could be a barrier for some of them. So would it be possible, I guess what I'm asking, would it be possible to lower the limit on the amount of coverage?
That's something we could look into. Our standard for all of our contracts is $1 million, and it covers to our encroachment permit. We could work with the city attorney and look at our insurance coverage and see if it would be possible to come up with a lower limit.
And I'm sure it's some certain types of encroachments would warrant $1 million, maybe $5 million, depending on the type it is. Okay. So with that, Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion. I'll move that we retain the ordinance section 17.57.040 D and the following sections concerning our sidewalk signs, that we direct staff to do an enforcement of our sign ordinance based on a complaint basis, that we ask them to review the fees associated with securing a sidewalk sign, including the amount of liability insurance, and come back with some recommendations. And I would also suggest that if a merchant, through the enforcement process, should be fined the $100, that they be allowed to apply that toward the cost and the permit of a sidewalk sign under the ordinance. That's my motion.
I will second that.
Friendly amendment that we ask staff to bring us back in 1 year for review.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds
Really want to talk about this again, no?
See if it really should go away.
So we're scheduling 2 hearings, then one in a year and one to review the fees? How about we just knock the fees down 50% and call it good and bring it back in?
If you're
Sure.
if you're prepared to do that, yes.
All right.
Go ahead, let's do it.
The 127, we'll knock the 127 down 50. Okay.
Any
But
other?
on the proof of liability, maybe you guys could just deal with that, okay?
I think we can. I mean, you know,
Okay.
we do have different standards, different levels of risk associated with different types of.
And we can get Carl to go back to the BIA and probably get the word out to the merchants that it's just an endorsement on their existing policy. It's not taking out a brand new policy, so it's not as onerous as one might think.
But we should. Yes, and we should also communicate with the business owners about this too, a little bit more.
Yeah, that's what Carl's for. He's our man out there.
And maybe we should encourage the person with the sign business to come in and talk to staff, and so she would know the ground rules when somebody comes in there, what they can and can't do. Great. Great.
Any other discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. That was the second to my motion?
Yeah, I was.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Opposed? Motion carries. That was unanimous.
Thank
you, Katie, very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for coming down
Sure, we can
tonight.
extract more pain out of their subject. Take it to Kimber. It's your car. Live with that design. It's like Wi-Fi in my car.
Next item is item D, consider a resolution approving the submission of an application to the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission for funding under the State Transportation Improvement Program, Regional Surface Transportation Program, and the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail Network.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
The Santa Cruz Regional Transportation Commission has put out a call for projects. They have about total of about $13 million in funding available, spread between the three programs, the STIP, the RSTP, and the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Trail programs. Eligible projects, eligible types of projects are street improvements, and there I'm talking about widening projects, sidewalk projects, road reconstruction projects where you repave roads. It does require reconstruction, which is more than an overlay. It has to be more than 2 inches thick of asphalt. Transportation demand management projects, that would be a parking management project or a signal coordination project. Bicycle and pedestrian improvements. And then because of the sanctuary trail funding in this grant call for grant projects, trail improvements as they relate to the rail corridor are also part of this. The grant submittals are due October 29th, which is next Tuesday. So staff has gone through our CIP and the sanctuary trail project booklet put together by the RTC, and has come up with a recommended list of projects, not an exhaustive list, and certainly the council can consider other ones. The Upper Pacific Cove Parking Lot Trail and Depot Hill Park improvements. I have a little slide on each one, so I'll just read them here. The Cliff Dive Pedestrian Improvement Project, those are both related to the Sanctuary Trail projects. More to the road improvement would be a Capitol Avenue, Bay Avenue intersection improvements, or a 41st Avenue paving project between Clares and Highway 1. So looking at the Upper Pacific Cove Parking Lot Trail and Depot Hill parking lots, simply what it is, this is the road that goes down into the Upper Pacific Cove parking lot. And we could build a trail that comes from about where the corner sticks out into that parking lot, up to the railroad, and then along the railroad corridor up to Monterey Avenue. There's some requirements. This is going to remain an active rail line, so we'd have to stay 12 feet away from the center of the tracks and have fencing along the trail so that people couldn't go from the trail into the railroad right away. But it's all very doable. We could include some railroad or pedestrian improvements to the crosswalks here, and then do some park improvements to this vacant lot or vacant area at the corner of Park Avenue and Monterey Avenue. And I think what we envision there is curb gutter and sidewalk all the way around the project, some landscaping, and what I'm calling here is a railroad feature. Maybe we get the Arts Commission to come up with something, or we find something somewhere that ties it to the rail corridor. Eventually, as if there is ever passenger service developed along the rail corridor, this would be a depot spot. And so we wouldn't want to put in anything too permanent there that couldn't be relocated at that time. I estimate the cost of this about $200,000. And just to give you an idea, this is just a very rough sketch, but I did, as part of the Lower Pacific Cove Parking Lot project, we did have Bowman and Williams look at the feasibility of a trail going up that hillside from the parking lot up to the rail. And they were able to lay one out that I think had to remove one small tree, and it basically level along the parking lot, and then it goes up as a ramp, and then it would follow the rail corridor. So it is a possibility. It's not something, we've looked at it. and it wouldn't be that hard. It's just one single ramp, but we don't have to build a bunch of switchbacks or anything like that. So the RTC, as part of their scenic sanctuary trail study, has identified that a primary connection will also be the Cliff Drive area. And so they've included in their project scoping actually doing pedestrian improvements where we right now have just a single crosswalk and with a trail up into the railroad corridor here. Since we won't have an active pedestrian corridor at this time, if we did want to pursue this, we would do some sidewalk or crosswalk improvements in the crosswalk here. Those would be mainly signage. We could look at a raised crosswalk, or we could look at some bulb outs in that area, and then an ADA trail that goes up to the level of the railroad. And since we won't have an active path there, I kind of anticipate we'd maybe build a scenic lookout from that point, so people could go up here and overlook the wharf in the beach area. That I estimate to be about a $100,000 project. Capitol and Bay Avenue intersection improvements. You've seen this slide before, different ways. I think most people think we probably need to do some improvements in that intersection. We had this very preliminary sketch of a roundabout put together at one point. Another option would be to put a traffic signal in there. I know we've talked about funding this. We've partially funded at points, and the funding's gone away. So here's another chance for us to try and find some funding for it. I kind of estimate that we won't. It's a $500,000 project to put the roundabout in. I don't think we will get a $500,000 grant out of this loan program at this time, or this grant program. So I would propose that we get a partial grant through this grant funding source, and then I know the Air District was also interested in granting funds to roundabout. So out of $500,000, we could ask for a $250,000 grant here, and then supplement that with an Air District grant once we have the design done. And finally, if you just want to get some paving done, the next section of 41st that we haven't paved would be from Clare Street up through Highway 1. I'd recommend we go all the way up to the bridge approaches on each side of Highway 1 and also on the north side, and redo this entire stretch. It would just be grind some of the existing pavement out and put a new pavement in. I don't see us changing any of the lane configurations, or we would continue to have bike lanes. We would have to make sure all these sidewalks in the area, curb ramps are up to code. I believe they are, but we would have to do that as part of this project. As an estimated cost of $400,000, again, we'd probably get a partial grant of $250,000. In this case, we would probably have to come up with the remaining funding to fund the project, and that was in my pavement management program for, I think, 4 years out, so we do have some money potentially set aside for that. Besides those 4 projects, I did come up with some other projects if you want to consider them. This first one actually came to me today. Would be a village parking management system where we would install parking sensors in all the spots, the existing Pack Cove lot, the new Pack Cove lot, and all the village spaces, and find a way to put up variable message signs that direct people to where the parking is. I know it's something we've talked about in various parking programs that studies we've done over the years. So I really don't have it's probably a $150,000 to $200,000 project when we're all said and done. There are some annual costs because the parking sensors do have some annual costs, probably in the $50,000 a year range. But that's something we could look at. We could do a more general payment management program implementation. Pick a variety of streets. They probably need to be at least, we couldn't do residential streets, but we could do minor streets and arterials. If you just don't want to do 41st Avenue, we could find another set of streets and do pavement management. Bay Avenue and Hill Street intersection, there's been some interest at times at looking at that intersection. I don't know if it's big, but thought it was listed here. And then on the traffic management side of things, we could look at trying to do some more signalization improvements, coordination along 41st Avenue. So because the grant deadline's coming up next week, we do need to take specific steps tonight. I ask that the council select from 2 to 3 projects and direct myself to prepare the grant applications and submit them. The RTC wants us to establish a priority of the projects so that they know where we want the funding. And I do need you to adopt the resolution with the priorities put into where it says to be determined on there as part of tonight's action. That's my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Steve, these are wonderful projects. Thanks for bringing this list to us. On the rail trail going up from Upper Pat Cove, and what kind of fence would there be between the
It
the
needs
tracks
to
and-
believe, I believe it's all in Federal Railroad guidelines, and I believe it needs to be a 6-foot-high fence. It can be chain link, we can make it wrought iron, we can make it pretty, but it needs to be something that's not easily scalable.
Mhm. And you said pretty?
As much as a 6-foot fence can be pretty. Yeah. I'm just saying, it doesn't need to be chain link if we
Right.
want to
Oh.
do something else.
Okay, okay. I think it, the aesthetics of it, I think, would be important. But I assume you can manage that, Darren, if this gets selected as one during the application process. The roundabout in Bay Avenue, Capitola Avenue, sounds very intriguing, but, a big project. What's the timeline that we'd be allowed to complete it?
I think there is a 3-year window to complete the projects, and that's once they're approved by the California Transportation Commission, which is probably another 6 months off. So,
You think because you wouldn't get any airboard funding until their actual next round next
Right.
year, the AB 27?
yeah, if we got this grant,
66.
we would be able to get the design done,
Mhm.
really tie down the costs, and then we'd be applying to the Air Board as part of their next grant cycle.
Okay, so we could hit that three-year window.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Good projects, always hard to choose a winner on this one. I'd like to add one into the fray, though.
Way to make it easier.
Yeah, make it a little tougher. Coming down from Hill Street, coming down Capitola Avenue, these are residents walking, who we encourage to walk into the village or the upper village, and they have no sidewalk that goes through 2 or 3 properties there. We desperately need to make a connection of where the new development on the corner of Hill that comes in through that one property there. We need that sidewalk continue for people to walk in the village. They don't have that now, and that's not. These are improvements that help people who live here. As much as I'm in favor of doing anything on the rail corridor, both of those really deal with tourists coming to town or people that are using the parking lot, and which I think are both important. But I think there maybe should be a priority to projects that improve livability of the people who live here first. And so I'm looking at that, and I don't think that's a major expense to do that one.
No, I mean, without looking at it, I would think that would probably be in the $100,000 range.
Yeah, that would make that continuation for people who live on Hill Street who's been asking
Is
for
it
that.
just the one property south of the,
It's one property, yeah, then you get past it.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm not sure, does the new taco bar have a sidewalk in front of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you have to get past the one where the boat sits all the time?
Right.
If we can get past that one, the people who live on Hill Street can get all the way down the hill. Okay.
Just really quick, I'd like to add that there is funding specifically identified for rail trail projects in this grant application.
Yeah.
So I do think we should identify one of the trail projects along with anything
Okay.
else.
I like the one coming out of Pacific Cove because it takes people off that walkway that comes in and out there. It's a safety issue. It takes them up there. And it really becomes our first movement that we do as a community towards the use of the rail corridor. And so getting that in place is a big step for us, I think. Okay, that's it.
Steve, could you put that list back up of the projects?
The recommended or the other options?
Well, you said there was only one rail trail that was the one. I agree with Dennis. I like the idea of the ramp. That's an ADA ramp coming up, and then it includes the whatever we call rail application area on the other side. That's all one.
Yes, that was one.
Yeah, that's a great project, and yeah, I think you already know I'm a big fan of the roundabout, so I'd love to see us try to procure that somehow. I think I'd probably lean towards the 41st Avenue paving, but
Can we take all 4 of those?
I think it's likely we'll get one rail trail project and one other project if we do all four.
Apply for all four?
Realistically, you think we're going to get two? That's how it's going to pan out?
Yeah, I think we'll get one of each. We could apply for all four. I have to be honest with you, I'm thinking of my time frame to get 4 applications done by next Tuesday afternoon, so if we can pare it down a little, I'd probably appreciate it.
And remember, they do ask for a prioritization. So,
How many people go that way out of the parking lot? I'd be really curious to know. Go that way and then down Monterey versus come through City Hall
I
go
would
that
say
way?
it's split 50-50.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
quite
it's
a
always
few.
dicey with the traffic coming in and the strollers. And
I know. We've talked about
I
that
think
before.
Of all the projects, I think that's our best project on the list.
Except for the chain link fence.
Sorry
Well,
about that.
we could do something like we have on Cliff Drive where you can see the ocean where it's just railings, couldn't we?
6 feet high, they want it.
Yeah, but you can see between it. You can see.
You can see between it, but you can't,
It could be wrought iron, correct?
4-foot spaces, yeah.
And you think that's going to stop people from going up the trail and making a
No.
left on the tracks? Okay, just...
The Federal Railroad Agency does. How's that?
Think of the people that get trapped on the other side of the fence when the train's coming.
Ooh.
But then they're
It works
trespassing.
2 ways. It keeps them off, but also keeps them on.
Just for the sake of conversation, if we pick the rail trail 1 and the roundabout 2, could we live with that?
I'm good with that.
I am.
Okay.
Well, not to toss a monkey in the wrench when it sounds like you're achieving consensus, there is that
I think we got Nels to stand up. That was an achievement.
there is the airboard grant, and I don't know what the maximum funding level is for the airboard grant, and they love roundabouts. So keep that in mind.
That was the motivation.
No traffic signals, please. No
Yeah,
traffic
they've been granting $300,000, $400,000
I just didn't want
for
to
roundabouts.
assume I knew the
Yeah.
answer.
This is a public hearing. Who would like to speak from the public? Good evening.
This has nothing to do with parking, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
But I've put on my general plan hat, so I'm seeing things in the general plan that the public really hasn't had much opportunity to get involved in. One of them is a new city hall, police department, library complex, and the other one is this robust hearing on a roundabout at Bay and Capitola Avenue. You know, when they were doing the sales tax and you surveyed the citizens of Capitola, I think the number one thing that came up, what did they want to see do, was fix the streets, make improvements in the infrastructure. And yet, when a pot of money becomes, and for years you went without doing any because of fiscal constraints, but then a pot of money comes up, this like play money, grant money, and the opportunity is there to make improvements in your streets that need repairs. It's like, kick that to the curb. We're going to spend the money on this roundabout. Now, I think the roundabout will prove to be a bad idea. The last time it was discussed, it was $800,000. Now it's down to $500,000. It's not at all pedestrian friendly. The whole general plan about this roundabout, I think, is really flawed about creating this whole pedestrian-oriented, all the businesses now facing towards this roundabout, something that's somehow supposed to handle 1,400 cars an hour in perpetual motion with pedestrians and everything mixed into these little islands of crosswalks and then little places to stop while the cars are whirling around you. I mean, I think when the harsh reality sets in, you're going to say, maybe the roundabout is not such a great idea. Well, let's have the opportunity for a good public discussion and get some experts involved in it before you apply for $250,000 of money to throw into the Someday Fund for this roundabout. Get the money for 41st Avenue, for these other streets, projects that you need right now that will have immediate benefits to the people that walk and drive and live in Capitola today, not for this pipe dream 3 years down the road. So with all due respect, I think you should focus on the things that you need today with your infrastructure and with your streets, and worry about the play money, grant money for a roundabout a few years down the road where that idea has had a chance to mature and be vetted out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Steve, what have been the discussion or about putting a stop sign there at Bay and Capitola? Putting stop lights? Have we looked at the cost of that and think that would be
The cost of that would probably be closer in the $300,000 range. We know it meets warrants for a traffic signal. I don't think we've had much discussion about it. We have had more discussions about the roundabout at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it would back up cars, but sometimes it's real easy to get through there, and sometimes it's really kind of dicey.
Right, right. I mean, the problem with that intersection is it's such a skewed intersection that people aren't used to looking where they need to look, and I think both options would help alleviate that problem.
Can we do sidewalks with this money?
We could do sidewalks with this money.
Are there places where we've talked about having more sidewalks other than Capitola Avenue up by Hill where there's gaps? I mean, we've talked about it, I know, on Olive Park Avenue. I'm not sure how many people use that or would use it. But
yeah, we have a grant for the Park Avenue sidewalk. We have sidewalks coming on 38th Avenue. Those are, in the one on Cap Ave, all of Cap Ave from up here is probably our biggest gaps that I'm aware of. We have lots of residential areas that don't have sidewalks, but that was more of a choice the city made, and we've continued that. So there's gaps in the Jewel Box area, but we don't have sidewalk requirements up
I wonder if there's room for a sidewalk on Wharf Road. I mean, with all the traffic that goes to the Shadowbrook, and they just have to walk in the street. I don't know if there's room there.
I'd have to look at it, yeah.
There is a continuous sidewalk on the Shadowbrook side. Are you talking about right? Oh, are you talking about right in front of the restaurant area?
From Capitola Road area down.
No, in front of Galinos.
Yeah.
Yeah. The people, when they park in that extra parking lot there, they don't have a sidewalk.
Well, you could do that probably with just striping it, because right now there's no curb and gutter there.
Right.
There's nowhere to put a sidewalk.
That's what I'm wondering. Is there room?
Is there
I wonder if there's room.
Seems like there is, but without going and measuring it.
Striping would work there. Make a motion, Ed.
Question, Steve, when we did the general plan, I'm trying to remember, RBF was the one that did the consulting on the street. Was it RBF that did, when the roundabout came into play, was it a recommendation from them? Did they say you can put signals? Do you remember how that came down from them? The introduction of that idea.
Yeah, the idea of the roundabout predated the general plan update, but RBF is the consultant that is doing the traffic engineering on the general plan. And it was identified originally as we were looking at ways to improve traffic circulation around the village. And no matter how we redirected traffic in the village, it always impacted that intersection. And so to alleviate the impacts at that intersection, we came back with the recommendation for a roundabout, and that was RBF, yes.
Right. What I'm saying is, maybe I phrased that wrong. It was recommended to us that the roundabout was a mechanism that would improve circulation.
That's correct, yes.
Or a four-way or signal.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not thinking that I'm thinking I'm still a believer of the roundabout. I mean, I've used them quite a bit myself personally. I've used the one in Santa Cruz. Because that intersection is, the word you use, skewed, it becomes dynamic, okay? I mean, it causes a lot of problems and backups, and I think that I think right now that the people that use it, some of the wheelchair people that go across that, cause some of the delays there, and having the sidewalks in between, I think it does provide a place for, I don't think it's a safety problem. I think it's having a place to stop and regroup and to continue without stopping the intersection. I remember when RBF came in and other consultants have looked at it, I mean, they strongly recommended the use of the roundabout. I think it is a solution to us. It's like a lot of other things we are going to someday go to. It's a change. And we don't have one in the town we use. I know they're getting ready to put the one in Rio Del Mar. That one was approved by the air quality, and I'm thinking now that we have access to these funds, that is part of the motivation, but I think the idea was a good idea to begin with. I'd still like to stick with that. And as I mentioned, I'd make a motion.
Could we take them one at a time? A motion for one?
Sure. Then let's make a motion for the rail trail project, the ramp out of the Upper Pack Cove into and across that one that was an estimate of $200,000. Make a motion that we adopt.
The first one on the list?
Upper Pack Cove Parking Trail and Depot Hill Improvement, yes.
Okay.
Make a motion for that.
And does that become our top priority project?
And that becomes our top priority.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And since I'm on a roll, I'll make a recommendation that our second priority is the roundabout.
I'll second that motion.
I'm not going to support it. I mean, I've talked with other people in other communities, and they said that people don't like them at first, but they love them after they've gotten used to them. But I'm just not sure about it. I'm not sure about it, so I'm going to vote against it.
Can I ask Steve a question on this? Steve, the way it's written right now, it just says the Bay Avenue Capitola intersection. Even though we're submitting a plan for a roundabout, does that preclude that we, through attrition, that we feel it doesn't work, that we couldn't use that money for another type of intersection improvement there?
I could write it in such a way that we're going to study between a roundabout or a traffic signal.
That leaves the option open. What do you think about that, Ed?
I'm open to that. I mean, I have no problems with doing a study. I have no problems with having more people add, information, but everything we've got so far was to improve that circulation problem, which we all know it is. It's either a roundabout or a signal.
I walk through that intersection twice a day, and anything is better than it is right now.
Well, the signal, I think, is not going to improve it to what we want. I think the roundabout is a great option for a lot of reasons, mostly because it's not a typical intersection. It's, narrow on some sides and extremely wide on one particular side.
Right. Well, and I'm going to support Ed's motion, and because, we have to deal with maintaining what we have, but I think that we also need to look at the future and trying to improve traffic flow, just not have traffic sitting on really nice repaved streets. So to me, this is a movement toward improving traffic flow. I sit on the Air Board. The city of Salinas has done a roundabout, actually more than one. The city of Watsonville is doing a roundabout. The city of Monterey has just been funding this year to also do a roundabout. So this is something that's coming at us, and I think it is an improved technology. I think that we need to look at it. We have an opportunity because this is a huge project. This is not something that we could necessarily do ourselves, and therefore, if we don't participate in these grant fundings with first here the RTC and then with the Air Board, I doubt that we would ever come up with the funds to do it. And we can use our own funds and our capital projects to do the maintenance and look at that. So, I mean, for those reasons, it is a hard choice, but I think I'm going to go. And also in terms of our climate action plan, we're going to have some, I think, projects that are going to help us reduce the emissions, and that's coming upon us as well. And I think this can be a part of that solution. So those are the reasons why I'm going to support the motion.
But we apply for STIP funds annually, or how often?
It's every 2 years.
Every 2 years. So we have, we do have an opportunity in 2 years to apply for funds then, too. Any other discussion?
One thing I'd like to add, one reason I feel so strongly about this is I also consider that intersection a gateway into the city. And I think that's be a great location for some kind of art project, possibly in the middle of that. I mean, along with the improvements we're doing on the rail, these are two of our main entrances into the city. I think it'd be great to enhance them. So just keep that in mind.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good work.
I have a question, Mayor Harlan. There's one resolution, so should we have two separate resolutions, one for one priority and one for the second? Because
no, thank you for bringing that up. So I think we do need to adopt the resolution with the order of priority that you established with your previous two motions. So if we do that as a separate motion to adopt that resolution, with the first priority being the Upper Pack Cove parking lot trail and the second one being the roundabout, or the intersection improvements at this point.
Steve, while we're in this discussion, would you look at that property and see the possibility of getting us a sidewalk to connect that for Hill Street?
I'd be happy to look at that.
Thank you.
Would someone like to make that motion?
Yeah, so we make a motion to adopt a resolution that the Upper Pack Cove parking lot be our first priority and the Capitol Bay Avenue roundabout be our second priority.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Thank you very much. Good work. Okay, that's all of our items that we have. We have successor agency meeting, so we'll adjourn as the City Council unless there's any comments from council members, and reconvene as the successor agency. And do we need a roll call? We'll note that all the directors are here, and we have one general government public hearing item.
Madam Mayor, council members, the City of Capitola has received a tort claim, injury lawsuit related to potential accident that happened, alleged accident that happened on the Rispin property. At that time, the Rispin property was owned by the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. The city has received the complaint, but the successor agency has not. So what's before you tonight is a claim from the city to the successor agency to put the successor agency on notice that it is potentially liable for some of the damages that may have occurred. The recommended action for you tonight is to accept the claim, to deny the claim, and to direct staff, to authorize staff to obtain independent legal counsel if it's determined necessary to represent the successor agency in this matter.
This is a public hearing. Well, first, are there any questions of staff? Are there? Then I'll open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak about this issue? Then I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the council.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That's all of our business. So we will adjourn as the successor agency unless there's any oral communications from members of the public, from council members or staff members.
Pay stations are up at Upper Pack Cove.
I saw those today.
Great.
Yes.
Nicely done.
2?
6.
I saw 2.
Thank you very much, then. We are adjourned.